So hi everybody, welcome to today's IAP Cinem Business Building webinar. We are joined again by Eric Maisel, who's going to be talking about part 2 of Redesign Your Mind. And as we like to do, we're going to ask Eric a fun fact. So what do we need to know about you, Eric? He said he's keeping it as a surprise. So what fun fact can you tell us about you?
I just signed a contract to do a book called Why Smart Teens Hurt Smart Adolescents. That's not the fun fact. The fun fact is that I have an 18-year-old granddaughter in Russia.
Oh, wow.
And a 15-year-old granddaughter in Brazil, and they will help me on the book.
Oh,
so,
that's lovely.
And I think I'll probably put their names on the book, and that will give them a little thrill. So that's my fun fact.
That's lovely. Really, really nice. And another book. Eric writes so many different books. So I'm your host for today. I'm Rebe Maguire, I'm head of CPD, and I'm going to hand you over to Eric, who just writes amazing things about amazing things. But today specifically, he's talking about your mind. And we all need help with our minds because they really can get mischievous. So Eric, I'm going to hand over to you. If everyone can stay on mute, and if you just got any questions, pop them in the chat box. And we're probably looking roughly, Eric, 45 minutes initially and see where it takes us. Would that be right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah.
Brilliant. We probably won't get to the end, but there is no end to this, so that's fine.
Brilliant. All right.
Let me refresh our memories as to what's going on here, what we're talking about. The basic idea here is that this book, Redesign Your Mind, presents a simple and I think fun technique for cognitive change. It's a technique for cognitive change. The simple idea is you visualize your mind as a place, as a room, and then you actively redesign and redecorate it so that the thoughts that arise in that room are now more congenial, more aligned with your life philosophy, more like the thoughts you want to be thinking. Simple idea with lots of fun built in, because you can imagine that redesigning your mind is way easier than redesigning your kitchen or redesigning your bathroom. This you can do in a split second and make some rather amazing changes in a split second. We left off, I'm just going to go through slides quickly to get to where we left off. You'll see as we go by what we've been talking about if you missed the first session. The idea, where do we live? Well, we live in Boston or Glasgow or wherever, but we really live in our mind. We take our mind with us wherever we go. That's why when we think, we're going to be thinking differently because we've gone on some vacation or adventure. We find that our mind still came with us and we're still thinking the same things. This is where we live, in our mind. It's often messy, sad, chaotic, all the things we know minds to be. We're often unhappy there, sort of sprawled out, and as this woman is, not equal to the tasks that we need to be doing. We'll return to these goals at the end, but this is what we're talking about. These are our goals with respect to this technique, to actually redesign your mind, to change how you are when you're in there. I'm calling that your indwelling style, but to be less angry in there, or less anxious in there, or less sad in there. To essentially be calm, content, and all those other positive words. To create some new practices, we'll be talking about that today. To deal with the kinds of challenges that make it difficult to be in our mind and to do the kinds of thinking that we want to do. And then to tie all of this to a simple but useful life philosophy. I've done a whole book on this life philosophy that I call Curism. The book is called Lighting the Way. That's its own subject, but for our purposes, the headline is that we're doing all of this mind change, mind upgrade, for the sake of living the life we would like to live. Talked about visualizing last time, just the simple idea that we can see, we can give ourselves visual cues and see things in our mind's eye. One of the most fun visualizations is just installing new windows in our mind room so that a breeze can blow through, adding an easy chair, putting up some bright wallpaper or painting the rooms a new color, bright color to cheer ourselves up, etc. Going through these fast because I want to get to where we ended. All of these are explained in the last episode. And then we were talking about changing your indwelling style. And we left here as one way to change your indwelling style that the second you enter your mind room, you remove your heavy overcoat. That's my metaphor for being conscious about the extent to which we enter our mind room sad, and how, as a visual representation of being less sad, we can throw off that heavy overcoat. We often don't want to go to our mind room because we know what thoughts we're going to encounter there, namely the same old ones that our own mind bores us. And so one visualization is to visualize a set of reminder cards that you have created, each of which reminds you of something interesting to think about or something meaningful to think about. Think of it as your meaning tarot cards or your meaning astrology cards or your meaning affirmation cards. But again, a simple idea that when you feel yourself bored, and I think a lot of us, even as busy as we are and as many things as we're doing, right beneath the surface, we are bored with what's going on. And so we need to remind ourselves about what actually might strike us as exciting. Just parenthetically, this will sound odd, but I'm an odd fellow. When I want to remind myself of something interesting, I think of Darwin and his wife and their conversations around religion and evolution, and I find Emma Darwin a very interesting character. So if I'm bored, I think about them. Similar idea, we often don't want to go to our mind room because of the way we keep repeating ourselves. Can't seem to stop repeating ourselves. So one fun tactic is to take any thought we have and change one word. Like, if you keep saying, I have no talent, change it to, I have no toaster. Or I have no toothpaste. You've got to laugh at yourself if you do that, right? You just have to. It's a very simple idea of taking any phrase that's been pestering you or that you can't seem to get rid of and just change a word. Something a little magical about that technique. Many people, you all know I work with creative performing artists. I've been doing that for 30, 35 years. Many creatives start lots of things and don't complete them. Get to the 90% place or the 40% place or the 96% place, and then move on to something else for about a dozen powerful reasons, including that if they call it done, then they have to judge whether it's any good. And if they call it done, then they have to put it out in the world and get pushback, feedback, and criticism from the world. So we have lots of reasons of keeping things not quite done. How to counteract this? Visualize a checklist, a completion checklist appropriate for the thing you're working on. Let's say you're working on a novel. Well, the elements of a novel are things like characterization and plot and scene. Those are the things that make up a novel. So your checklist would have those sorts of things on it. Characters and scene and plot and setting. And when you felt that your characters were strong, you checked that off. And when you felt that you understood your plot, you would check that off, etc. That you would actually actively use this checklist in your mind's eye to talk yourself through and toward being done. You could tell this could be its own hour. This incompletion idea could be its own hour, because an awful lot of people are stuck here. And often the way they'll say, the way they'll explain this situation to themselves is, I love so many things, I can't stay put on one thing because something else that I love pops into my head. So they rationalize, they excuse away their inability to finish things. One of my favorite short stories or essays of all time, Kafka's The Hunger Artist. His story about the fellow who could find nothing he enjoyed eating, so he became a circus attraction, starving himself away in a cage. People came to watch him starve. I think as much as we may eat, as much as we may drink, as much as we may do, I think a lot of us are starving for something. And so the visualization here is to visualize appealing, mouth-watering things. Could be actual food, but it could be anything that actually appeals to us, appeals to our, I think that we're born with rather amazingly large appetites. I think we're born with a lot of chi, a lot of life energy. My little grandkids, they're hungry all the time. Is it snack time yet? Continually hungry and continually busy. And then that goes, and then in the teen years, we know how that starts to go away. As you think you're too fat, it's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Starvation starts. Very simple idea. There are things that we mean to get done and we resist doing them because they're harder than checking our email one more time. They're harder than going down some rabbit hole on the net. Writing our novel is harder than checking our email. So we're resistant to writing our novel. It's not big resistance, but it's just enough to keep us away from our novel today or tomorrow. So the visualization here, and it's an auditory visualization too. It's that sound that you hear when you have an ice cube tray and you twist it and the ice cubes crack. That cracking sound when you're twisting an ice cube tray. And that's an auditory or visual reminder that we have to find the way to crack through daily resistance, or else we won't get our work done, our real work done. We'll still get lots of other work done, but we won't get our real work done if we're not cracking through this resistance. This is just the headline that your indwelling style matters. We could talk lots more about this, but we have other interesting subjects to go to. Now we're in the territory of not only redesigning and redecorating your mind, but creating new practices there so that when you go there, you start to do some new things in your redecorated mind. One of the most important ones is telling yourself the truth, speaking out loud inside. Having the equivalent of the Hyde Park Speaker's Corner in London, where for hundreds of years, folks have been able to say anything they wanted without threat of being arrested. This is you speaking to you. Whether you want to say these things to your husband or the world or anybody else is a separate question, but you want your Speaker's Corner as a place where you make sure that you are saying your truth to yourself, that you're not censoring yourself. Freud said all creative blockage is self-censorship, and while that's not true, a lot of it is. A lot of creative blockage is us being afraid to show ourselves to the world. Creativity of the sort that a writer does or a painter does is also revelation. It's also revealing. And we're not exactly sure we want to reveal ourselves. So this is all by way of saying we want to have a space, a practice, where we know we can tell ourselves our truth. I've mentioned this quote before from Pavarotti. Pavarotti said, people say I'm disciplined, and it's not discipline, it's devotion, and there's a big difference. So lots of creatives feel undisciplined, but it's actually not about discipline. It's more a lack of devotion, a lack of love, a lack of passion. These are all in the same family, these words: devotion, curiosity, love, passion. Set up an altar in your mind room where you can feel devoted to those things that are meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be to your novel, it can be to your children, it can be to your world, it could be devoted to anything. It can be devoted to a way of being. It can be you devoted to your desire to be calm. But we need more devotion and more passion. You know that we're a rather dispassionate culture. We're not supposed to display affection. We're not supposed to look passionate. It's unseemly. Also a little dangerous, especially if we're passionate in the service of some cause. That starts to become dangerous. For a passionate whistleblower, that's dangerous. So the visualization here is a blazing fire, which you can visualize to stand for rekindling your passion. If that flame has flickered out, and over this COVID time, these last 2 years, how many flames haven't flickered out over these months? If some flame has flickered out, that if you've gone to some give up place, create a blazing fire. Remind yourself that you have to bring the passion. It's really not optional. If we want to live the life we mean to live, passion is not optional. So let's say you are in your mind room angry or upset. This is a simple visualization, and that's to use your hand as a gun, so to speak, and just shoot the venom out. Release the anger through your pointer finger. Again, simple visualizations, things to see in your mind's eye, see yourself doing. The reason it's so good that it can be in your mind's eye is you may be in a meeting where it would be inappropriate to raise your hand and start shooting the people in the room with your finger, but you can do it in your mind's eye safely. It's particularly difficult to figure out how relationships are to work in this COVID time, how you're supposed to be with your best friend or your ailing mother or anybody in the world. And for a lot of creatives, they really don't, I'll say this softly, like people all that much. So they may have to make a special effort to relate to other human beings because you can't just create. That's too cold a life. You have to both create and relate, both. And so this idea, simple idea of visualizing an appointment book, which helps remind you that you have to set up real appointments with other human beings for those appointments to happen. Our grown daughters who live, I don't know, half a mile from each other, still have to make an effort to see each other because each has a busy life. And even though they're a stone's throw from each other, they still have to remember somebody has to reach out and make an appointment, so to speak. I didn't actually get the right slide for this because I sort of see your rebound corner as one of those gyms that we grew up with like rubber mats on the walls. I guess that was to protect us from running into the walls. Different from an insane asylum padded cell, but still the idea of soft walls that you can bounce off of. Because we have to get off the mat a million times over, don't we? And there can be that one time, maybe we've gotten off the mat 99 times in a row, and then the 100th time, we just don't feel like getting up again. For that 100th time, you want the availability of this visualization of you rebounding in some fanciful, fun way, even sort of bouncing around and off all the walls and the ceiling. Like those old dance numbers where in the 1940s where the dancers could dance on the ceilings, Fred Astaire on the ceiling. Try to, with each of these, try to amuse yourself. This is one of the most important ones. We censor ourselves, we keep ourselves from asking for what we want, we keep ourselves from reaching out to people, so to speak, bigger than us. We need more boldness. There's that famous phrase from somebody that I'm going to mangle about genius being boldness, or we all know that phrase, except I don't remember it exactly. So think through for your mind room. I mean, my grandkids, their boldness outfits would be contemporary superheroes. We know who they would be. Batman and Superman and Spider-Man and Aquaman and I don't know, all of them. Yours might be more arcane. Might be one of those clay warriors buried with the Chinese emperors, or who knows what it might be. Something that amuses you, some warrior outfit that when you visualize it, you immediately get that feeling of boldness. I'm pausing for a little effect here to just be with this woman running across the beach off the ground. We need so much more ease than we have, so much more peace than we have. And so the internal visual representation of that ease that we want, again, let's say you're in your business suit at a meeting feeling completely not at ease, in part because of the clothes we have to wear in the world. Well, even though you're in an outfit that produces no ease, you can still, in your mind's eye, be in your leisure outfit. You can, in reality, be one way, but in your mind's eye, be in a very different way, an easier way, a calmer way, a more peaceful way. This is an idea out of Kirism, very simple idea. We do a pretty good job in life of not responding impulsively to things that go on. Pretty good job. But we know that we're not as aware as we would like to be, generally speaking. something comes up. Let's say it's a family matter. You and your teen are having your customary fight, and both of you are saying the things that you customarily say. You could probably just play a tape recorder there. Neither of you really has to be there. It's just the same fight. But let's say that you wanted this to be different, and that's what we're talking about, cognitive change. Let's say you wanted this interaction with your teenager to be different. Mentally, you could see yourself taking one step to the side of your usual position. Again, you're doing something very visceral and physical, except you're only doing it in your mind's eye. You're breaking the customary routine by taking this step to the side. And it's a step to the side that you want to take in heightened moments when it's especially hard to take this step to the side, when you're angry, or when you're about to betray someone and you don't even really mean to, but the set of circumstances have gotten you to a place where betrayal is the next step. Well, wouldn't it be lovely to step to the side of that, have an extra split second not to engage in that betrayal? And this can be one of your mantras. Let me step to the side. This is its own hour, of course. The idea that we have to remind ourselves that we and our efforts matter. As I've said many other places, many times before, all postmodern people have in a corner of consciousness the idea that they're just excited matter made by the universe because it could, and not here for any particular reason, for not any real purpose. Even if we believe other things than that, we're carrying the load of that belief that we don't really matter. And we have to respond to that unfortunate belief that we don't matter. We have to keep telling ourselves that we matter to ourselves, that we are going to don the mantle of meaning maker, that we're going to make our meaning, that we're going to live our life purposes while we're here, that we have a personal responsibility to ourselves to matter. The universe is not caring or asking anything of us. So we have to ask it of ourselves. Oh, and many more. So there are many other practices you could institute. If this were a week-long workshop, we would now stop and dream some up. But for the sake of our time, we will move on and start to meet some of the challenges that will prevent us from doing the things we've been chatting about. Some predictable getting in the way things. To do this imagining, we have to have some permission to imagine. And this little boy can still imagine, but about 5 years later, he's going to stop imagining and he's going to want to know what's on the test. He's going to need to know facts, and he's going to be told to draw within the lines, and everything about school and his community and his family, and everybody's going to tell him to stop imagining. Oh, he'll still get a little praise for the drawing to put on the refrigerator, but barely, because now it's going to be about getting into Stanford, even though he's 9. So we have to remind ourselves that we've lost this. I think a lot of even creatives don't realize the extent to which they've lost the ability to imagine, or that it's suppressed. Lost may be too big a word. Let's call it suppressed. And whereas if you ask a kid, can you put a salmon and a skyscraper together, he'll start drawing a salmon-shaped skyscraper. If you ask an adult that, they're going to like vomit. put a salmon and a skyscraper together, those are different things. Please don't ask me to do that. So this slide, this check-in is about noticing for yourself if indeed you have trouble imagining. If when you go to your mind room, it's kind of blank, like you don't know what's there or how to see things. This would be not just an hour, but about 17 hours worth of talking about. That is the difference between the so-called epidemic of depression and more common sense and commonly used words like sadness and despair. From my point of view, and I'm in the critical psychology, critical psychiatry, and anti-psychiatry camps, there is no such thing as the mental disorder of depression. If you hate your boss, that's not a mental disorder. That's you hating your boss and being sad. But again, this is a long story, but this is something that will prevent you from making use of this cognitive change technique, and that is that background coloration of the blues. That's why one of those early slides of cheery wallpaper or painting your walls a new bright color, that's really important. It's kind of half silly as it sounds. I think we need to do that almost as a first measure. Get those walls painted Navajo white or one of those bright whites. It goes without saying that we're all anxious and worried. It goes without saying, but what has to follow from that truth is that if we are anxious, the number one thing we do when we are anxious is to flee the encounter if we can. If we're afraid of flying, we don't go near airports. We get away from airports. If we're afraid of performing, we stay away from the stage. And if our own thinking makes us anxious, we stay away from our mind room. So anxiety is a great silencer and it's a great stopper from thinking. Which is why for every client, and I've done whole books on this, everybody needs an anxiety management tool or two that works for them. We all need some tactic, technique, strategy, tool with regard to anxiety management, whether it's a simple breathing one, whether it's a cognitive one, whether it's a somatic one, whether it's something as simple as getting up and walking around your chair, which breaks certain kinds of anxious thinking. My book on this, as I say, I've written about this a lot, but the book on this that addresses it the best, I would say, is a book called Mastering Creative Anxiety, in which I think I have 20 categories of anxiety management techniques. So there are lots of things to try to manage your anxiety. And the headline is, you need one or two of them. You really need to own one or two of them so that they're available when you're anxious. It's one thing to be calm during your 45-minute meditation practice first thing each day. That's lovely that you're calm then. But if you're instantly anxious after the meditation practice ends, that's not so wonderful. Then you still need some anxiety, some portable anxiety management technique that goes with you wherever you are. Another 7-hour subject. In my view, personality is made up of 3 parts: original personality, formed personality, and available personality. Very simple model, but it's pretty robust. And I think it speaks to who we are. Psychology is not interested in original personality. It acts as if we don't come into the world already ourselves, which is insane. Anybody who's had kittens or puppies or kids or has ever seen any kind of creature knows that every creature comes into the world already itself. More curious, less curious, more sensitized, less sensitized, whatever, itself. We have to take that into account as something that may stop us from doing this work. Some aspect of our original personality, some extra sensitivity, some extra sadness, some extra X. These are not mental disorders, but these are lifelong challenges. Our original personality, including intelligence, may prove to be a lifelong challenge. That's why I've done a book called Why Smart People Hurt, and it's why I'm now doing this book called Why Smart Teens Hurt. Smart folks have special problems. This is obviously not to say they are better than other people, but they are different, with different set of challenges. So there's no real way to address this because we don't know what our original personality was, because the second we start thinking about our original personality, we're already thinking about it from our formed personality. It's the nature-nurture question. We don't really know whether we're actually identifying a piece of original personality or looking at a piece of formed personality. But to use this model, we have enough available personality. That is, if we have enough remaining freedom, and that's really how to think about available personality. We have enough remaining freedom to chat with ourselves about these interesting questions. Is this a piece of original personality that's keeping me from my mind room, or is this a piece of formed personality? And to be able to tease out a little bit of that situation so that we better understand what's preventing us from being the person we intend to be. Again, as I say, this is a multi-hour conversation, especially about the idea of available personality as an amount that changes over time depending on how you are. To say this simply, if you're an addict right now running around town looking for heroin, you have less available personality than the moment you enter recovery. The moment you enter recovery, you have more of you available to you to live the life you want to live. Yes, big cinder blocks will go right by formed personality as a challenge. I'm pausing here because what can one say in one sentence about trauma? Let me just say one thing. To be able to regularly go to your mind room in the way in which we've been chatting about it, you will probably need to be able to remember experiences, because you may still be working them through without re-experiencing them, without being flooded with the emotions that come with the remembering. So this is something for everyone to remind themselves about, that there is a way to get, there's a place to get to where you can remember what you need to remember without having to re-experience it. Again, this is another long conversation, but the headline here is, in order for us to make use of our ability to think, we also have to deal with the effects of trauma and other adverse childhood experiences. Freud had a lot of goofy ideas and a lot of good ideas, and his ideas about defensiveness are among his good ideas, and I think that's why his daughter, Anna Freud, ran with that idea and explored defensiveness as her lifelong work. We do have a variety of ways with the kinds of names that Freud identified: rationalization, intellectualization. We have ways of keeping the truth from ourselves. And this is a nice wall. I'm glad I found this slide, because this, I think, this wall does a nice job of representing how difficult it might be to get to the truth on the other side of this wall. Yes, there's a way through, but it's hard in this picture to know if that's big enough to get through, or if we have to break down the wall. Metaphors aside, it is the case that we often avoid thinking about things because we don't want to know the truth about things. that we don't want to get the relationship between not working on novel 3 and never having found a home for novels 1 and 2. We don't want to know that about our life, that we are deeply disappointed about novels 1 and 2 not being published, and now we can't work on novel 3. These are the kinds of things we want to keep from ourselves. But actually knowing that allows us to work on novel 3. We can get to say, okay, I'm bitterly disappointed about novels 1 and 2 not having been published, but A, G, I can self-publish them. This is a new era. B, etc. We can have the cleansing, healing conversation that allows us to both know the truth and move on. I know we're coming up on time. I think I'm just going to maybe just hit us on the headlines of the slides. Oh my gosh, each one is big. All sorts of cultural and personal injunctions against speaking our truth. Less so in some countries, more so in other countries, but true everywhere, that it is dangerous to speak the truth, to be the whistleblower, to be the little boy who points out that the emperor has no clothes. In that cute story, everybody joins the little boy in pointing out the naked emperor. In real life, everybody joins the emperor and harms the little boy in real life. It's genuinely dangerous to point out truths. Well, of course, all sorts of circumstances, from tornadoes to floods to COVID, get in the way. You can tell I'm zipping through now. Darn, but this is another 7-hour one, and that is that if your life is not feeling purposeful or meaningful, it's going to be hard to want to spend time in your mind room doing the kinds of things we need to do. And the two paradigm shifts that allow you to deal with lack of purpose and meaning are to move from the idea of life purpose to the idea of multiple life purposes. That's a healing and very effective shift, because suddenly you realize and remember that lots of things are important to you, that you're not hunting for one thing, but that lots of things are important to you. And that meaning is in your control, or at least in your ability to influence. To say that we make our own meaning is not precisely true, but to say that we can encourage meaningful experiences is true. Again, I'm leaving that idea dangling because it must dangle for the moment. This is right at the end, which is lovely. I'm glad we got to the end. And I think, yeah, this returns us to our goals. This will be a way for me to summarize. I know you all get this metaphor, you get the imagery, you get the idea of what it's like to go to your mind room and make some changes. It's a very simple, easy to grasp idea, and I think robust. Maybe a little harder to think through how you are when you're there. What's your indwelling style? Do you have one that you can identify? I think a lot of people are regularly anxious the second they try to think about anything, and so flee that encounter, and so end up not thinking about the thing they intended to think about. So as important as it is to visualize what's in your room, equally important is to visualize how you are in that room. Which connects to number 3, and that is to think through what new practices, like speaking your truth, having a Hyde Park speaker's corner, that kind of new practice. What kinds of new practices you might like to introduce, and maybe the sequencing of them. So you come in and you do X. Maybe you flip the calmness switch when you come in. Then you do the next thing, which might be sit in your easy chair. Then you do the next thing. That is, just create a sequence that works for you, a valuable sequence of these visualizations that amount to a way to be. Obviously, things will get in the way of you doing this work. Those are these predictable mind room challenges, each of which has to be met. And all of this is in the service of you taking personal responsibility for living the life that you intend to live. For myself, I may have mentioned this in the last webinar. For myself, I have encapsulated my whole life philosophy into the following phrase: do the next right thing. And I think you could see how you might come up with your own phrase like that, and then use it in your mind room to help you understand what's the next right thing to visualize in your mind room. And obviously, you can change the wall colors, the number of windows. You can change everything in a nanosecond. It's one of the beauties of this technique is everything can align to the way you want it to align in an instant. I think I'm going to put a period here and open us up for questions. Have I left a few things out? No doubt. But I hope that I've presented a coherent picture of this technique and this idea that if we want to make cognitive change, here's a simple and, to underline, enjoyable thing to try that can have some really positive consequences. Okay, Ruby, let me turn it over to you and see if there are questions.
I'm on mute. I thought I'd unmuted myself. So we had Beatrice who said, with the defensive wall that you had, well, there's a hole in it. Isn't that enough? So not necessarily a specific question, but maybe something you'd like to respond to.
We need it. We need the right sized hole, namely one that allows us to actually see the truth, because a small hole allows us to only see a portion of the truth, not enough of our truth. We all can see through the cracks of that wall somewhat. We're not completely blind to ourselves, so we're all seeing ourselves somewhat. But the goal is to see ourselves, this is a high bar goal, to see ourselves perfectly clearly. For the sake of our life purposes, so that we can make sure that we are the person we need to be in order to tackle the work we want to tackle. So that's a long-winded way of saying a small hole is not sufficient. We need like a big, large door that we can walk through easily without bumping our heads.
Brilliant. Thank you. Hopefully that was useful for you, Beatrice. And James Rosenblum, he said, what Leonard Cohen called the crack in the wall, which lets the light in. He also said, what about another session? This was where you were saying you were running out of time to go through different things.
Well, I think that we are setting up a whole series of workshops with me for the coming year. So I think everyone will be alerted to that. I think we have at least half a dozen coming. So we'll get a lot covered in the new year.
Brilliant. So Hugh, the book requires visualization. How would scaffold for those with suppressed imagination? So I really love this question, Hugh, because my husband would always say if he closes his eyes, he can't see anything. It's like, what do you mean you can't see anything? I see everything. And he said, no, don't think like that. That's not how I think. So I think great question.
I don't have a brilliant answer to that, but what comes up for me is the idea of returning to childhood. Again, if you can't visualize that, then you can't visualize that. But I think anyone can remember what it was like to be 5 years old loving a book or running around, being a child. I guess that would be my first piece of advice to someone who feels like he or she can't imagine anymore, would be to look back to childhood and remember how imaginative you were back then. As I'm saying that, I'm not sure that would work. I think it's a very serious challenge to regain the freedom to imagine if that's been somehow stolen from one. There may be a lot of healing work needed there. Um, this could become a long-winded answer because I also write in the authoritarian personality field, and I know that folks who have had to live with an authoritarian father, mother, sibling, grandparent have lifelong difficulties imagining. So the answer can't be a short answer there. It has to be the long answer of how to heal from authoritarian wounding. So I guess I'll have to put a period there without a really adequate answer, but a lack of imagining is not a kind of small issue. It actually reflects a very large problem that a person's been, I think, suppressed and wounded over the course of his or her lifetime.
Thank you. Anyone else got any questions? I hope that answered to some degree for you. Not saying anything else. I've shared in the links for anyone who wants to check out Eric's books. I've shared all the different ones that he's been talking about as he's been going along. Has anyone got any other questions?
If not, then let me just thank everyone and invite you to get Redesign Your Mind. And if by chance you're a writer, there's a Get Your Book Written group starting that I facilitate, starts beginning of October. If that might interest you, come take a look at my site, ericmaisel.com. And also I'm available for individual coaching, and I'm just starting a new service starting in October of nonfiction book coaching, helping people with their nonfiction books. So if that happens to be your world, come join me.
Brilliant. Where would they find out more about you, Eric? Would it just be
ericmaisel.com, ERICMAISEL.com.
brilliant?
That's where I live when I'm not in my mind.
Fabulous. And a couple of people have been asking about replays, so I'm just going to share with everybody, yes, there will be replays. They will go on to the IAPCNM blog. Just hold fire. I think we're going to do Ria's going to put both on at the same time because the first one isn't on there yet, from what I understand from Eric now. And so we will get them out. So just keep an eye on that, and that will go out in the next few days. And I will chase up my end as well. So brilliant. So we're going to always do the same thing. We have a CPD time. So I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute. What I want you to do is share in the chat box your biggest takeaway and make a note of anything that you've learned today as a result of being on the webinar. So I'm just going to set that timer. We do this because it's so easy to go away and forget after a session. So it's capturing the notes as we go through is so much better. So I will start that timer now and we will go quiet. So that's the end of the CPD time. If you need a CPD log, just hit reply on any of our emails and request one. We can get Ria to send one over to you. Eric, I'd like to thank you for today and share a few comments if you haven't seen the chat box. So Diane Petit says, merci Eric, j'adore ton approche. I don't know if that's how you say approach. So Annie, regaining the power to imagine and cracking open the wall. Sina, is it multi-life purposes rather than one? So many, there's so many. So what I'll do is I will send those over to you afterwards, Eric, so you can see all the lovely things that people are saying. And we just thank you very much for your time. Very thought-provoking. If you haven't read the book, I really encourage you to. It just gets you thinking a completely different way about your mindset. It's brilliant for you as an individual, but it's equally brilliant for you to work with clients as well. There's lots of different quick strategies you could use in a moment if you needed to. So highly recommend the book. It's brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Eric, for your time. Thank you everyone for being here with us live, and the replay will go out onto the website, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye everyone.
Goodbye.